Amen. Let me invite you to grab your Bibles with me. We're going to land in 1 Peter 5, but we'll make a brief stop off in 1 Timothy 3. So if you'd like to prep both of those, you can do that. We are still working through this Healthy Church series. We will, Lord willing, be back in Hebrews the first Sunday of October. Picking up in Hebrews 11 where we left off. As we wind down on this Healthy Church series, seeking to identify what are the biblical markers of a healthy church. If you're going to look for a church that is a healthy one, what ought you be looking for? We've covered a lot in this series. This might be right at the top of the most important of sermons that will be preached in this series. This one on elders or biblical eldership. The sermon in a sentence would be this: a healthy church must be led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders. A healthy church must be led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders. You're like, well, yeah, right. Isn't that what we do here? It is what we do here. But it is not what is done everywhere. Not all of you perhaps know my story. I have a marketing degree from a very small, very conservative Christian university. And so there is no seminary in my background. Graduated from college, was off to the Marine Corps, blew up my knee, and the Lord had other plans, and I find myself preparing to go to OCS, Officer Candidate School, knee pops, and now I find myself an intern at a small Baptist church. And if you've ever had one of those things happen where you're like, I don't know how I got here, that was that. I don't know how I got here. I thought I was going to be a first lieutenant, and now I'm a youth pastor intern who has never preached a sermon, basically never preached a sermon in my life. I got 6 kids in front of me, and we're just going to bring the heat. And it was just one of those kind of deals. And so that you talk about learning as you go, that's sort of how that went. I did that internship for a year. That went from November to November in December. So 1 month exactly later, I started, now no longer an intern. Now I am a full-fledged, fire-breathing youth pastor at another small Baptist church down in south of where I was before in Lower Michigan. And again, no training, don't know a thing. Somehow I got an office, I got a title, they're paying me something. This is awesome. And I recall quite distinctly sitting in, I'm not sure how I missed this, but somehow I'm sitting in church on Sunday morning, and the ushers all are handing out ballots. And on the ballot is a lot, actually, on the ballot. On this ballot that's handed to me is a bunch of names of deacons who have been nominated by somebody, I don't know who, and are up for election. And so I think according to our Constitution, I think we needed I think we needed 6, and there was 5 on there. So in other words, we're going to get all these guys are coming through. So there's this ballot, and then there's all these other positions, treasurer, and there's a couple names under there, and one of you isn't going to get it, sorry. And so that was kind of that was what happened. And again, maybe I missed the meeting. I'm certain I did, but somehow, in my 24-year-old brain, I'm like, all right, deacons, because we in that structure, which is quite typical of certainly Baptist churches and others, I suppose, as well, there was not a plurality of biblically qualified elders. Rather, there was a pastor. We called him the senior pastor. And then he had a board of advisors, which is called deacons. So I'm arguing a healthy church must be led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders, as opposed to a pastor with deacons who serve as advisors and who are led by the congregation. So back to me in the Baptist church. Here we go. So I got the 5 or the 6 names, and I think we need 7. So all these guys were going to get it, but we voted anyway. So check. And then there was the committees, right? And this is lots of committees. And there was the roofing, the committee to take care of the roof, and then there was the committee to handle potlucks, and the children's education committee, and all of these committees. And so you're going to elect all of those people, and pretty soon, can I get another pencil? Because you need another one, because there are so many elected positions on this ballot on this Sunday morning where I received the ballot. And then I think we had a business meeting that Sunday night to elect all of these positions. So there's that. So you have the pastor and his deacons, his elected deacons who are kind of running this thing. And then you have business meetings. And business meetings are essentially where all the Baptists get together to fight with each other about what color the carpet's going to be, or which type of shingle should go on the roof, or which curriculum we're going to pick for the children to learn. And you could tell, and I'm colorblind, so I didn't really get in on the color of the carpet ones, but you could see battle lines being drawn, and you got signs out front, vote for blue, and that's not a party, it's a color. And so anyway, so you got that going on. So then we go to the meeting, and I got my brass knuckles on, and I'm ready to roll, and I've kind of read the room with the deacons and the pastor because he's kind of the president. And so you're going to do whatever he says. So I'm like, all right, I want to keep my job. I'm going to go with him. And so anyway, that's kind of a flyover with some small level of, you can see stereotype and joking there, but that's pretty much the way a lot of churches are run. Elected positions, committees, a pastor who kind of runs the show with a deacon board who are like advisors, but then ultimately the decisions, all of the decisions go to the congregation, which is where we pick everything from who our youth pastor is going to be, which they picked me, to what color the carpet's going to be, and shingles and everything else in between. We are not that. You will never get a piece of paper with 5 guys' names on it, and you get to check the boxes of who the guys are that you approve. We are not that. We are what would be called an elder-led church, which means that while the congregation bears responsibility in some very significant ways, the elders, the pastor, don't have an advisory board who then get feedback from you and then do what you want. That's not how this works. I am a pastor or an elder, same exact meaning. I'm a pastor, I'm an elder with other pastors and elders on this board. I don't have more authority than any of them. They can all tell me no and have. And we take the primary responsibility to lead this church toward greater levels of health. And I want you to see that works, not only because ballots are not a great idea and a poor way to elect deacons and elders, but more than that, I want you to see that because that is the biblical model. Okay, so again, here's our definition. A healthy church must be led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders. Now, I say led because that word led, or you could say shepherded, or you could say pastored. That's what elders do. Elders lead, elders pastor, elders shepherd. We'll see this quickly coming in Hebrews 13, but here it is for now. Hebrews 13:17. Whoever wrote Hebrews instructing this church, obey your leaders, your elders, your pastors, your shepherds. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they are keeping watch over your souls as those who have to give an account. Who have to give an account. Elders will give an account, a particular kind of account to the Lord someday for how we did the thing that He had called us to do. There's a weightiness to that. You're not sitting back hoping that your name got checked on the ballot. There's a weight to it as a God-called, God-appointed elder. Let them do this. Let those elders do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. Elders lead. That's why that's in there. Elders lead. Second, you'll notice in my definition A healthy church must be led by a plurality. That means more than one, fancy word. By a plurality of biblically qualified elders. I say plurality because this is interesting. You will not find a single pastor with deacon advisors model in the New Testament. It is not there. The New Testament only knows of a plurality of elders. Elders, plural. Some of you don't believe me. You're like, well, if that's true, then why are there so many Baptist churches with one pastor or, a senior pastor and then advisors around him? I don't know why that is, because it is so clear in the New Testament. Like, I knew it was clear going into this. I walked away going, holy smokes, like that's even clearer than I thought it was. Don't take my word for it. Acts 11:29 and 30. So the disciples determined, every one according to his ability, to send relief to the brothers living in Judea. So the disciples, who are meeting the tangible needs of the people in the church, look at the brothers living in Judea and say, we need to help them. In verse 30, and they did so, sending it to the elders, plural, by the hand of Barnabas and Saul. Acts 14:23. And when they had appointed elders, plural, for them in every church, with prayer and fasting, they committed them to the Lord whom they had believed. Acts 20:17. Now from Miletus, he sent to Ephesus and called the elders, plural, of the church to come to him. That's Paul. He's calling elders, not elders singular, not senior pastor, elders, plural. 1 Timothy 5:17. Let the elders, plural, who rule well be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. Titus 1:5. This is why I left you, Titus, in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders, plural, in every town as I directed you. Elders, plural. Now, there's a bunch of reasons for that I'll get into later, but suffice it to say, the New Testament is unmistakably clear. Elders. Local churches ought to be led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders. And I say biblically qualified because of texts like 1 Timothy 3:1-7, which I hope you're there. 1 Timothy 3:1-7. The saying is trustworthy if anyone aspires to the office of overseer. Now you're like, well, I thought we were talking about elders. Well, we are. The word overseer and the word elder and the word bishop and the word pastor in the New Testament, they are all talking about the same thing. I could give you examples of where they're used in the same way in the same sentence. So when you see the word elder or pastor or bishop or overseer in the New Testament, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the office of pastor, the office of elder, okay? So, you probably very rarely hear the word bishop used. We don't use it very often, but it means the exact same thing. Elder, bishop, pastor, overseer, all the same thing, okay? I remember having a guy tell me one time when he heard I was an elder, he's like, you're too young to be an elder, because he thought that the word elder had to do with age. In some contexts in the Bible it does, but it's not about, when we're seeing it in these contexts, it's not about age, it's about an office that a man is called to. The saying is trustworthy if anyone aspires to be to the office of overseer, or to be an elder, or to be a pastor, or to be a bishop, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Context here, Paul is telling Timothy how to appoint elders in local churches, including his own. And in doing that, there are biblical qualifications for that. Paul repeats a similar list of things in Titus chapter 1. So I say biblically qualified because the Bible has very clear qualifications for an elder. The thing that so frightened me, go back to me as a youth pastor at the age of 23, 24 in that little Baptist church, is that there are these names on this list. They got nominated somehow, Probably there was a reference somewhere in there to go read 1 Timothy 3, 1-7, or Titus 1, and make sure these guys lined up. But here's the problem. I was on staff there. And I could have picked all of these guys out of a lineup, but I didn't know anything about their personal lives at all. But you hand me my ballot on a Sunday morning, and I got to make a decision by Sunday night. We're going to check some names. I remember having a conversation. This is where I began thinking. This is one of the things that caused me to start thinking there has to be a more biblical way than this. That, there's a certain percentage, like it's got to be, 80% something, 90%. I don't remember what it was, but you got to pass with 80 or 90% if you're going to be a deacon at these Baptist churches. I don't know why. Well, I know why they didn't call them elders. They didn't call them elders because that was what the senior pastor was, and then the deacons were the advisors. But nonetheless, we elected them. There are qualifications for deacons right underneath this, you'll notice. But I remember having someone say to me one time, pointing out the problem of this model. He said, according to most Baptist constitutions, if you pass with 95 or 97%, man, you nailed it. Because there are just some people in Baptist churches, God help them, you're here too. But given the opportunity to vote, your vote will always be no. You don't even know, it doesn't even matter what the question is. No. Just, no. Just, what about no? Just, what, macaroni and cheese? No. So there are some people who are just a no. Give me the no box, I want to check that one. Just a cantankerous little son of a gun, and you're going to get to heaven with us someday too, but you're going to make my journey there a little more difficult with all your no's. And so I'm joking. Just don't email me, okay? Just no. So I'm kidding about all of that. But the fact remains that if you're at 90, 95%, you're killing it in the Baptist church, right? And so this guy points out to me, he says, well, in a Baptist church of 100 people, you got 2 no votes, which means you passed at 98%. But what if one of the no votes was the guy's wife? And I thought to myself, yeah, so what if one of them was his wife? I'm over here, I've barely even seen this dude, he's got a yes from me, but what if his wife's a no, right? What if his wife says, this man does not manage this household well, he does not love me well, he does not lead himself, he does not lead us, right? That's why that model's a bad model. I understand there's some American democracy that sort of influences the ballot model, but it doesn't work in churches. And it doesn't work in churches because I recall sitting in on those deacons' meetings, of which I was not a deacon. I was a pastor but not an elder, so I'm just there. And I recall watching these men who are elected by their congregation to lead the church. I recall some of the most carnality and walking in the flesh that I have ever seen in church, in the deacons' meeting. Don't even get me started on the members' meetings. Those could be disastrous too. But in the deacons' meetings, these guys yelling at each other. One of them, this was the high point, one of them, the chairman getting angry because the rest of the guys weren't going his way, standing up, resigning, and walking out. It got a little quiet for a while after that one. And so these dudes, and here's the problem with that. Normally, here's how you become a deacon in a Baptist church in a lot of these models. Have the biggest farm, be there for decades, be there for a long time, be successful in business, be a generally liked human being, and all those things are fine. Be the doctor, be the businessman. Nothing wrong with having the biggest farm or being a doctor or being liked or being in a church for a long time. But none of those things are actually in the New Testament with regard to biblical qualifications for church leadership. And yet that's how it happened. And if your deacons, if your leadership structure within your church are unhealthy, guess what the church will be? Yeah, unhealthy. And so there must be a better way, and there is a better way, and it is the biblical way, and it is to hold up this office of elder, overseer, pastor, bishop with the level of gravity to which God holds it up, and make sure that we are being led by a plurality of biblically qualified elders. Here's the process at Redemption Hill of becoming an elder. Perhaps somebody in the congregation says, hey, so-and-so would make a great elder. And so one of the elders will go to so-and-so perhaps and say, hey, so-and-so, do you have any aspiration, if anyone aspires to the office of overseer, do you have any aspiration of being an elder? They're like, it's funny you say that. I have been feeling a desire to lead in that way. And so that begins a very, very long process. It is a minimum of 6 months, but it almost always goes longer than that, where that brother starts coming around. He'll sit in on elders' meetings, and he'll be asked every kind of question that you could possibly imagine. All the ones that would make your face red, we're going to ask him all of those. All the ones about theology and doctrine, we're going to ask him all about those. And it is a long process. And then you, of course, know, because you've been in on this, after the elders of the church really, really vet this person, then what happens? Because of the fact that the elders know that we are not infallible, we then bring that person before you. And we say, here he is. If you know anything about this person that would disqualify them from the office of elder, you come and tell us. I mean, we've already met with his wife, we've talked to his friends, we've talked to him, we've watched him and watched him and watched him and watched him some more. We took him out to lunch, we watched him there, we watched how he handled the waitress, we watched all of that. But the fact is, we can miss stuff. So if you know of any reason, and after he comes through all of that process and you agree with the elders that this man should be an elder, then he comes through there. It is not a check a box. It's a very serious, very weighty process. And once that happens, we come to 1 Peter chapter 5, where Peter lays out how it is that these elders ought to do the things that the New Testament calls them to do. I want you to see with me 6 things. 6 things that the Bible clearly calls these elders to be. I thought, I could have preached the sermon from 1 Timothy 3 about the qualifications. You can go study that. We've taught on that before. But 1 Peter 5 is a little bit of a less known passage on elders, and I thought it'd be good for us to see these. I've got 6. You might come up with less or more than that, but I've got 6 things that these elders ought to be. Now, we'll read the entire text, and then we'll make these observations together. This text has already been read in your hearing, but I want you to see it here again. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 1. So I exhort the elders among you. Again, elder, overseer, pastor, bishop, same thing. As a fellow elder, that's Peter writing, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd, here's the instruction, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The first thing that I see here that an elder needs to be is he needs to be accountable. Number one, he needs to be accountable. That's where and I'm getting that from this, again, plurality idea, this plurality of elders. So I exhort the elders, plural, among you. Now, there are other reasons for there to be a plurality of elders. Like, for example, no pastor anywhere, no elder anywhere is able and capable to do all of the things that are required in this task of shepherding the flock of God. So there needs to be more than one because our giftings tend to run rather narrowly. And so you'll be good in some things and really awful in some others. And so having a plurality of elders allows for there to be greater levels of competency across the leadership structure of your church. That's one thing, but that's not what I have in mind here. What I have in mind here and what I believe to be the principal reason for a plurality of elders is that of accountability. Accountability. The problem with the senior pastor model, where you're the senior pastor, you're ordained, you went to seminary, you're legit, is that it is very, very difficult, I would say impossible, for you to not stand over and above those deacons that are your advisors. And you certainly will stand over and above the members of the congregation in their eyes. Maybe not in your eyes, but in their eyes. Because you're like the president. And that creates kind of a culture of you're above everyone else. And the reason that one of the reasons that a plurality of elders is called for is for accountability. Now, certainly, anybody in this room can come to me about anything and say, hey, what about this or what about that, or question me on anything. That's for sure true. But I'm not known by very many of you. You know who I am, but I'm not known by you. I am not known by you like I'm known by my brother pastors, my fellow elders, the guys I'm in the trenches with. They know me. And so when they see me act in a particular way or just can tell by looking at me that something's not quite right, they are invited into, as we are all with each other, a certain level of transparency and accountability. That's why a plurality of elders is such a beautiful thing. When you watch these big-name pastors who tend to blow themselves up with some mild amount of regularity, that is often, it's for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that their church structure is awful. They're the CEO, and they have a board of advisors that live in other places, and so it's very easy for them to blow themselves up, because they don't have the look me in the eyeballs 3D level of accountability that is required in this journey toward Christ. Elders must be accountable. Hence the idea of plurality. Number 2, elders are and must be accessible. Look at this. So I exhort the elders. What's that word? Oh, I wonder if my mic's not working. Let me try this again. So I'm in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1. So I exhort the elders, what's that word? Among you. Among you. Verse 2, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. Elders must be accessible. If the imagery of a shepherd shepherding sheep, which is some of the imagery of being a pastor, pastors better smell like sheep. Shepherds smell like sheep. Shepherds know their sheep. They're accessible, which means they're not in a cathedral, and they're certainly not in a green room. You know what I'm saying? They're not in a cathedral. They don't sit 35,000 feet above their congregation and look down upon them. They don't expect some sort of homage to be paid to them by these lowly peasants. They are 3D, boots in the dirt, eye level among you. They also do not sit in green rooms and walk out when the band is done and rip the thing and then go back to the green room. They don't do that. Elders are accessible. They're with their people. They are down in the trenches. They understand that they are called to shepherd the flock of God, but that they themselves are in the flock. Now, will some of us elders ever be as accessible to you as you want us to be? I would say no, not all of you. But the postures of our heart need to be accessible. There's a reason that you, if you pay attention, have every one of our cell phone numbers if you want it. Every one of them. And that's because we want to be accessible. That's why every week when the elder of the week, which does not mean the guy that did the best job, right? Not the guy that got a trophy that week. Not that. Elder of the week means he's the point man. If you need something, you call him. There's his cell phone number. And so elders ought to be accessible. Number 3, elders ought to be and are responsible. Look at this. So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. That's beautiful. We'll get there. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you. That's responsibility. Exercising, next page, oversight. Exercising oversight. Somebody said, it's a great line, somebody said the word oversight means you have sight plus responsibility. Like anybody can see, like I can see, but oversight means not only can you see, but you have a marked responsibility to do something about the things you see. That's oversight. Oversight, my word would be, it's seeing plus action. This is what an elder is called to. They are given a particular responsibility, a particular authority that with it comes responsibility, and that responsibility is they're responsible. They're responsible to shepherd the flock. They're responsible for oversight. That means that a good elder, a good shepherd, is going to see at things, and it's good there's a bunch of them because none of us all see perfectly and clearly, but they're going to see things, and then they're going to take action against the things that they see. This is why Paul can tell the church at Ephesus in Acts that fierce wolves are coming. He's telling them, hey, be on the lookout, elders, for fierce wolves. When you see them, because it's not only the ability to see it, take the proper action. That idea of shepherding really, it's kind of in my mind, it's an overarching term of what it means to be a pastor elder. It means that you preach and teach. It means that you lead. It means that you protect. It means that you, Ephesians 4, equip the saints. Do you know why God gave apostles and preachers and elders to the church according to Paul in Ephesians 4? So that they would not do the ministry, but rather equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. Do you know that? So what you do here is not like a football game where you sit in the stands and watch the professional, which is supposedly me, but I'm not, do the thing that needs to be done. No, my responsibility, the responsibility of a faithful biblical elder is to equip you to do the work of the ministry. It's not sit back and watch me do the work of the ministry, though I have my own work of ministry to do also, but you do it too. And so that's actually the design behind this idea of shepherding. And so a good elder is going to be responsible, going to feel the weight of this shepherding and this oversight from verse 2. Going to see that oversight means that we need to see things with clarity and take appropriate action when we see the things that we see. We're going to preach and lead and protect and equip. That's what elders are called to do within that realm of responsibility. Number 4, elders will be faithful. Elders will be faithful. So to review, accountable to God, accountable to their brother elders, accountable to the congregation. Number 2, accessible among the congregation. Number 3, responsible, exercising shepherding and oversight. Number 4, faithful. Peter continues, he exercises oversight not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you. Willingly as God would have you. See, a good elder is going to be an elder with his eyes fixed on God, not necessarily on the prevailing winds of culture, not necessarily on the prevailing desires of the congregation, but a good, faithful elder will allow his love for the congregation, which he better have, to be superseded by his love for God. He will look to the congregation and meet their needs in the ways that he can, but he will primarily look to God. And so it is that a good elder is faithful. He will lead, verse 3, as an example, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. Now, what's fascinating about this, and it's something that you need to make sure that you mark well, Peter kind of launches into the end of this letter he's writing by addressing elders and then kind of shutting the thing down. But you'll notice in chapter 5 and verse 1, he begins with what word? Yep, this is where so, right. He begins with the word so, which links what he's about to say to elders with what he had previously said. You might ask, what did he previously say? Well, I'll read it to you. Therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. You go read 1 Peter, and what you see is that Peter is serious about equipping this church to suffer well because suffering is coming. So he says, you are going to suffer well, entrust your souls to a faithful Creator while doing good. So I exhort the elders among you. And I think what he's doing there, and I don't think you can argue this, what he's doing there is he's actually reminding the elders that if the church is going to suffer, who's going to suffer first? The elders. Why? Because if the flock of God is headed toward heaven and suffering is coming, who will be out front of the flock? Who will be in the middle of the flock? Who will be behind the flock, leading those who are slowing down along? The elders. And when the wolf pops out of the woods, who should run to the wolf? The elders. And so it is that faithfulness is an absolute mark in the life of an elder because suffering is coming. And a faithful elder will lean in during difficulty, not run off. You don't want that kind of shepherd. You don't want the kind of shepherd who the wolf shows up and he's like, I'm out. You don't want him. That's why I have very little use for these traveling private jet green room elders, pastors, who know nothing of hospital rooms, who know nothing of difficulty, who know nothing of counseling, who know nothing of standing and looking the members of their congregation in the eyeballs. I have very little use for them. And an elder must be faithful, and he must be among the flock, and he must suffer. And when it gets difficult, you're looking for a guy that'll lean in, not run off. This is what I call amongst our boys, I call this grace-driven grit. I want to see a guy who's got some rebar in that concrete. Like, I want to see a dude who's ridden a few horses into battle, had them got shot out from under him and went and found another dang horse. That's what I want. Some guys that have seen a thing, come through that thing, didn't become hard to become brittle, but also didn't fold up like a cheap suitcase. Those kind of guys. Because this is not an easy task. And if you think that shameful gain, a little bit of this, or you think that hunger for power, this domineering, if you think that shameful gain or some kind of power-hungry something down inside of you, making up for some daddy wound somewhere, is going to get you through the dark nights and the wolves and the sheep that bite and the storms and everything else, you're going to be out of here. And so this man needs to be a man who's faithful, who's demonstrated faithfulness to his wife and to his children if he has them, who's demonstrated a stick-to-itiveness, who leans in and doesn't run off when it gets difficult, and who isn't out for some kind of shameful gain or some kind of quick shot of power and authority, because those things will not carry him through. What will carry him through is eyes fixed on God. Which brings us to number 5. He must be faithful, but he also must be humble. He must be humble. Verse 4, when the chief shepherd appears, he must be humble. Do you know why? Because he's not the chief shepherd, and he knows that. His eyes are fixed on the chief shepherd, and he is not him. And there is a marked level of humility in an elder that understands that. These are not his sheep. This is not his church. This is not his pulpit. This is not his book. These are not his sermons. He does all of this as an under-shepherd. He himself knows that he himself is a sheep. He himself knows that he is under someone else's authority and only runs with delegated authority. He himself knows that if he takes his eyes off of the shepherd, he is in big, big trouble. This is a man who has learned how to fix his eyes on Jesus. This is a man who is continually reminded when he wants to take up some sort of power or establish some sort of name for himself. This is a man who is quickly reminded. Who is quickly reminded in the morning when he puts his face in the book that he is following the shepherd and that there's a level of marked humility in his life over that. He's not going to apologize for the fact that God has called him to be an elder, but he's not going to have some kind of chest-thumping swagger to him either. And listen to me, he will not have a chest-thumping swagger because God will have wounded him. Leaders have a marked limp about them. All of them I've ever met, how is it that God has banged you up by his grace? And all of them have said, well, not that he hasn't, but that he has. An elder, a biblical one, will be marked by humility because he knows that the chief shepherd is the chief shepherd and he is not. And there will be a particular limp to him. He has bled and he will bleed some more. Number 6, an elder's going to be joyful. He's going to be humble. There's going to be a weight and a gravity and some blood and some sweat and some tears and some eyes fixed on Jesus and all of that. But his humility will actually be borne out in significant joyfulness. Why is he joyful? Now notice I didn't say happy. I'm not saying happy. He's happy when everybody likes him. He's happy when the church is growing. He's happy when people like his sermons. He's happy when the YouTube or whatever's blowing up. Like, that's when he's happy. But I'm not talking about any of that because all of that is very, very fleeting and not worth chasing. No, he's joyful. He's joyful in the midst of suffering because he knows that the chief shepherd is coming. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. He's joyful because he knows that he is a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. He's joyful because he knows that, yes, as he looks to the chief shepherd, there's marked humility there, but he also knows that that chief shepherd is coming. And so there's joy in the midst of the difficulty and the trials. Does that apply to everybody who's not an elder, who's a follower of Jesus? It absolutely does, but it must apply in a marked way to the men that God has called to lead his church. He's joyful. He's joyful because he knows that we shepherds follow the shepherd with joy. And it is worth noting that Jesus is the good shepherd for all sorts of reasons. But one of those is that he knew how to suffer. And you know what he did when he did? The writer to the Hebrews helps us here. When Jesus suffered, when Jesus came into the crucible of his suffering on the cross, the writer to the Hebrews tells us that it was the joy that was set before him that carried him through. It was the joy that was set before him that carried him through. And if the chief shepherd suffered like that, with joy propelling him through, then what ought the under-shepherds do when they suffer? Other than to lead the flock of God by example, by looking to the joy, the reward that is coming for them. One day the good shepherd will appear. One day, one day, every good elder, there's a lot of bad ones. One day, every good elder gets done with their task, hands the flock off to Jesus and says, I'm out. I'm done.
I've played my part well. I've finished. And every good elder lives for that day. Every good elder lives for that day. Like, I'm not saying that I wake up in the morning, I'm like, but with Bible reading and prayer and accountability, every good elder, on the days when he wants to quit, and on the days when he wonders what it'd be like to just show up and not have anybody look at you, just worship with your family and nobody coming at you, on all those days, he's reminded of the fact that he is leading the people of God toward the kingdom of God, where the Son of God will show up as the good shepherd, and then he'll bring his people home, and as we sang this morning, hold them forever. And so he's joyful because of that. 2 words, perhaps just a phrase for you to think about. None of this is news to the guys here who are elders. None of this is news to them. Might be news to you. I understand why. This was a word for us as elders, but it's also a word for you. But these are the things this is the phrase I haven't been able to shake all week as I've thought about this. So what then should you do? My answer, I think it's a biblical answer. Come and pray. Come and pray. I say come because the elders are called to lead, and they're called to lead in a particular direction. And that particular direction is not so much a geographical location as it is a person whose name is Jesus. Come with us. Come with us. Come, and that's how Peter shuts that section down. Be subject to these men that God has called to put in this place. Come with us. And if you find that you, for whatever reason, can't come with us, then go find some elders that you can go with. But come with us. Come with us because every good shepherd wants to see those under his charge meet the good shepherd. So come with us. So I say, come, follow the Jesus that we're called to be following. Remind yourself of the truth of the gospel. Make sure that you have believed that gospel. Don't stop believing that gospel. Follow us as we, by God's grace, with marked humility and all of these other things, and joy and accountability and all of those things, follow us as we lead you by God's will toward Christ. Come with us. But also pray. Come and pray. Pray. I think that sometimes perhaps we get so used to saying things like, I'm praying for you, that we lose the glory of that. Maybe because we know that the person who just said they're praying for us isn't. Maybe because of that. Or maybe because we've lost sight of the wonder of what prayer is. There's a lot of ways that I have been encouraged by you over the years. None greater than when you come to me and you say, I am praying for you, and I know that you mean it. Come and pray. Pray for your elders. It's commanded biblically. Pray for your elders. Pray because the task is great. And I assure you that the men that are leading this church know that. The task is great. Pray because the wolves are real. Pray because the terrain is rough. There's a long way in between here and glory, should the Lord tarry. Pray because the journey is long, and it is. Pray because the wounds are real and the suffering is fierce and the sorrows are there. But pray because the joy is immense. Pray that your elders would see that. And pray that we would lead you well. And pray that we would continually take heart in the midst of the things that the Lord has called us to do, because God is faithful. And pray that your elders would know that. And pray that your elders continue to be men of the book. And pray that they're faithful. And pray that they remember that they're called to love their wife and children more than you. More than they love you. And pray that they not get in this thing for some kind of their own name. Pray that they continue to pray what they often pray, which is let us do this job in such a way that our names will be quickly forgotten so long as his name is remembered and worshiped. Faithful biblical elders that are bound to the book, believing the gospel, leading the people that God has entrusted them to, and being prayed for by those people. That right there will redound to the glory of God. We will all be there in eternity with him together. God is pleased by that, and it cannot get done apart from the prayers of you lifting us up. I wish that you would do that increasingly so for these men that God has called to lead. Let's pray together. Father, thank you that you have not left us to grope in the dark, wondering what it is that you have called us to do, wondering how it is that you've asked us to structure your church, but God, you've made it so clear. So I praise you for that. God, I pray, as is often the request, that God, you would keep us elders faithful, that you would kill us before we would lose sight of you, that you would protect this church from us. Many are the dangers, and we are aware of the sin in our own hearts. God, that our eyes would be fixed on the great shepherd, that there would be a marked humility about our lives, but also a pervasive joy. God, would you use this church in mighty ways for your kingdom and for your glory, not so that any of our names are remembered, but so that yours is remembered and worshiped for all of eternity. We pray it in the name of your Son, our good shepherd. Amen.